1, 2, 3, 4. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Yeah, Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour.
Welcome to the Crazy Chester Radio Hour. My name is Andreas Werner. I'm a record producer, songwriter, and owner of Crazy Chester Records. The theme song you just heard is performed by Wet Willie's Jimmy Hall and Funky Chester. The Crazy Chester Radio Hour is a weekly music talk podcast featuring an eclectic group of guests with musical hearts, minds, and souls. And many of the episodes will dive deep into the rich history of music mecca Muscle Shoals. My guest today for this Christmas edition of the Crazy Chester Radio Hour is Michael Supe Granda. Supe is a member and co-founder of the Ozark Mountain Daredevils, one of the quintessential Americana bands of the past 50 years, in addition to releasing a string of eclectic albums on his own. He's also been performing a children's show under the name Silly Grandpa and is active as Santa Claus during the Christmas time. Supe has also written an autobiography called It Shines, the Saga of the Ozark Mountain Daredevils, where he talks about his life in and around music. Supe, welcome to the Crazy Chester Radio Hour. Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Yeah, no problem, my friend. Call anytime.
We met not too long ago down in Muscle Shoals.
Yes, I've been invited down to play the Handy Fest for I think 6 years now, 5 or 6 years, and which is very convenient for me because living in Nashville, as you know, a couple hours, boom, you're there. So they invited me down to play several shows in several different configurations. I usually play like a lunch set where I just play solo by myself and I sing my songs just acoustically. And then that evening, I have a band in Muscle Shoals, a rhythm section, bass, drum, and a guitar player, and John Aiken on harmonica, and I front the band. And I can play a whole other set of my music with a thumping Muscle Shoals rock and roll band behind me. And I've just kind of been introduced to Muscle Shoals with, like I said, within the last 6 or 7 years, and I just love it down there. I love it down there. I like the way the guys play, the musicians play. It's not what they play, it's how they play. You know, and I just kind of like the more relaxed vibe about it, and I really, really adore it down there, and I can see why you like it down there so much.
Yeah. It was fun that particular day. It's like we played our little, gig with the Mocho Mixers, and you said, hey, let's do something together. You got up and sang and played harp on one, and we had a good time.
Yeah, I had a great time, and that's another reason that the Muscle Shoals musicians seem to be more open to. Oh yeah, come and sit in. You come in, sit in, and you play this, and I'll play this, and it's very welcoming, and I like that about a music scene.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is the Christmas episode of my podcast, and I'm glad that you're my guest this week because for several reasons. One reason that I don't know if many people know that, but you're actually, and people won't be able to see that through the internet, but you have an impressive, beautiful white beard, and you also kind of moonlight a little bit as a Santa during Christmas time. But besides that, you've also done a Christmas record called Cool Cool Yule.
Yep.
And where you feature some of your different bands on it, and you told me that it's a collection of mostly original Christmas songs, and some a little, may I say, on the funny side of things too.
Some of them are on the humorous side.
Humorous side.
You know, I find there's a difference between being funny and being humorous.
And I certainly didn't mean to.
No. I understand, but I've always been on the funny side of the coin. You know, and I've always been, even when I was a little kid. When I was a little kid growing up, one of my favorite songs was Papa Ooh Mau Mau, Papa Ooh Mau Mau, Papa Ooh Mau Mau. And the sillier the song got, alley-oop, the sillier the song got, the more I liked it. So let me see, I'll be 67. My birthday is Christmas Eve, here in a couple days, and I'll be 67. So when I turned 60, my wife asked me, "You want a big party?" I said, "Nope." "You want to take a trip?" "Nope." "Want to go on a cruise?" "Nope." "Well, what do you want to do for your 60th birthday?" And I said, "I want to build a fire in the stove in my studio and sit there." And I wrote Christmas songs. And I think I wrote 6 or 7 Christmas songs and recorded them. And that's what Cool Yule represents when I turned 60 years old. As a songwriter, it just hit me, and a litter of Christmas songs came out of me. And so that's what's on that record. Now, to finish that thought, being 67 years old, my hair and my beard had turned white, and an old fat guy with a big white beard can make a little extra cash during the Christmas season by being a professional Santa Claus.
While making a lot of people happy too.
Right, yeah. Children of all ages. Sometimes I go to, corporate, office parties, nothing but adults, and it just, when Santa Claus walks in the room, everything gets brighter. Everything gets lighter. The air gets lighter. The children jump into my lap and they tell me what they want, and they all get candy canes. And the adults at the Christmas parties, it's just a blast.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of playing a few duo shows with Donnie Fritz earlier this month, and he has 3 original songs. One is called Sears and Roebuck Santa Claus, and the chorus is like he's a Sears and Roebuck Santa Claus appearing at the local mall. Children think he's 10 feet tall. He's a Sears and Roebuck Santa Claus. So that's kind of what you meant, lighting up the room and kind of making that difference.
Yeah, and it brings joy to a lot of people, and I really like that. I like doing that. And it's also what my funny, humorous songs do. When people hear them, they laugh. And for 3 minutes and 10 seconds, I want them to forget their troubles and immerse themselves into a funny little story.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
And you perform under different names, or you label different shows differently, release records under different names.
Yes.
Obviously, you're still a member of the Ozark Mountain Daredevils, where you still perform.
Yep.
But you also do different things. You do records as Supe de Jour, you do some as Soup and the Sandwiches, all in different configurations. And I think also this record kind of featured different configurations in a way.
Correct.
So how do you decide, this is going to be a Soup and the Sandwiches project you're working on, or is that something that's kind of late in the process gets decided?
It kind of happens later in the process. Every one of my records, I wait until I have about 15 songs that I've written, and I go in and I start recording them. And when I get about halfway through, I get a feel for where the songs are taking me, and I get a feel for where the collective album is taking me. And I'll go, well, wait a minute. This is more of a Soup and the Sandwiches record, or this is more of a solo record, And then for the last half of the process, I'll tailor the back half of the recording process to either veer towards complete insanity with Supe and the sandwiches, or kind of semi-insanity as Supe du jour. And I've done that for forever. And then if I hear, being a songwriter, I've got hundreds and hundreds of songs to choose from. And if I need a really stupid song, I can go back and find it. Or if I need a kind of semi-serious song, I can find it also. But I've got one thing I've started doing here recently is writing children's songs. I have 5 grandchildren, and I started writing songs for them about 4 or 5 years ago, and I put out an album with a character I've created called Silly Grandpa. Silly Grandpa comes out, and it's strictly for 4-year-olds. And I come out, and I've just turned into a goofy character, and I entertain children. So there I had a whole bunch of songs like Biscuits and Gravy, and another song called Oh, Chicken in the Yard. And I make chicken noises to entertain the children. And that's in addition to Supe sandwiches and Supe du jour. It's just another project, and it's a little area I've started to explore, and it's really been fun being a children's entertainer, both in the studio and with my children's shows. And I'm going, wait a minute, maybe turning into an old fart mountain daredevil isn't such a bad idea. Isn't such a bad thing.
Yeah. You've been very prolific, and you're a very creative person in many ways, but you've been writing all the time. And would you mind elaborating a little bit on maybe your life as a songwriter? I think with every Ozark Mountain Daredevil record, you had more songs on there. It seems like in the beginning you might have written one per record, but then it's more and more. The most recent one, it has a lot of songs.
Yes.
You on it. How did that progress happen?
When the Ozark Mountain Daredevils started in 1971, we gathered as a collective of songwriters more than we did as a rock and roll band. In 1971, everyone was tired of playing the new Doobie Brothers song. Everybody was tired of playing Beatles songs and Rolling Stones songs. We didn't really want to be a cover band. So we, as being songwriters, we all gathered from day one, song one, verse one. Songwriting was the main focus. So we all gathered. Now there were 5 songwriters in the band. When we picked songs for the first record, the 4 other songwriters got all the songs. On the second record, I threw one of my songs in. And the third and then fourth, and then, like you said, I started throwing more into the pot. Now, I didn't really start writing songs until right around 1970, 69, 70, 71, in that area. So I didn't really have that many songs. Since then, I've been rather prolific, and I've gathered songs and amassed more songs. But on the Daredevil records, I got a song every other record. And then I got a song every record. And then all of a sudden, I got 2 on the side. And then all of a sudden, 3. I was going, oh man, this, as my songs started to get better, they got included into the Daredevils format. And as a matter of fact, we've just recorded a new record that should be out first of the year if it's not out already. And I think I've got 5 songs on it. So as a songwriter, I've become more prolific, and more importantly, I've gotten better at it. Well, the more you do something, the better at it you get. And when you write, it's like a muscle. You exercise it, it works better. So, I think my songs here in 2017 are much better than they were in 1971. And to put a cap on that thought, brother, I was with some very good songwriters. The Ozark Mountain Daredevils. We weren't a really great band. We weren't the best guitar players and drummers and piano players and bass players. We weren't all right. We were a good band, but we were great songwriters. And I learned playing my partner's songs how great songs were written and shaped. And so I had some really good teachers, and to that I give them a lot of credit.
Yeah. Well, with the Daredevils, your main instrument is playing the bass.
I played bass on all those records.
And a lot of times when you do your songs solo or with a band, you play guitar too. What can you maybe tell us a little bit about how the difference of playing and singing in a band, playing the bass or versus playing the guitar?
Yes. On all those records, see, I was a bass player when the Daredevils got together. We went and made that first record. I played bass. And then when I started writing songs, even on my solo records, I'll play the bass on the basic track. And then I'll come over and overdub some guitars and harmonicas and stuff. But I'm real particular about the bass part. It's just like building a house. The base of the house, if you don't have a strong base, you can build a real fancy house on a crummy base, and it'll fall down eventually. But if you have a solid base, you can build a really, really cool house on it. Now, when I go out and play, sometimes I play bass, sometimes I play guitar. And when I go to Muscle Shoals, Terry Richardson plays bass. And I'm real particular about bass players if I'm going to step out front and front the band with a guitar and a harmonica. Terry's a very good bass player. There are a couple bass players up here in town that I feel comfortable. But if I step on stage and the bass player isn't, up to par, I don't feel right. Okay, give me that bass. It goes like this. Boom, boom, boom. The difference is I feel I have a little bit more freedom when I'm out front trying to entertain the crowd and trying to engage the audience and draw them into the stage presentation as much as the music. And when I'm playing bass, that's a little bit harder to do. But when it comes time to make a record, I play bass. Because that's going down in history. A gig is a gig. You throw it out into the air, everybody has a good time. At the end of the night, it's over. But when you're making a record, man, that lasts forever. And I'm real particular about the bass on my records. That's why I play bass on all of them.
Yeah. Another project you played bass on more recently is Burrito Deluxe, which is kind of a successor of the Flying Burrito Brothers.
Yes.
Would you mind telling me how that came about and how you got involved with that group of musicians?
Yes. I guess. Well, the Burritos kind of disbanded and dissolved, and they all went in their other directions, or they died. And I think about maybe 15 years ago, Sneaky Pete wanted to resurrect the band. And he called a singer, guitar player by the name of Carlton Moody, and said, let's put this new band together. And I got this idea. So they got Sneaky Pete, and they got Garth Hudson, and they got Rick Lano to play drums. And the bass player was Stick Davis from the Rhythm Aces. So they put out a couple records, and they went out, and they toured, and they went all around, and they were having a great time until one day, Stick, I don't know if he got sick or he had to go do something else. He called me and said, Supe, would you like the bass chair in Burrito Deluxe? And I went, Well, let me see. Okay, the Daredevils weren't working too much. So I said, yes, I'd love to do that. So that's when the band took a real turn, and then Sneaky died. And as he was dying, he took Carlton aside and said, Carlton, don't let the band die. Keep the music going. So Carlton has kind of carried the torch. And so Carlton and Rick Lano came back in, and they had Richard Bell playing piano. Walter Egan was playing guitar. And we've had a series of pedal steel players because the pedal steel is so important to the Burrito Brothers sound. So we had a succession of pedal steel players. And so I've been playing bass with them now for, for maybe 10 years. And we don't work much. When we do, it's always fun to get together and play those old Burrito Brothers songs. And then along with that, we complement it with new material that Carlton and I have written. Now we've recorded another record with the Burrito Deluxe. Seeing as how Sneaky Pete was gone, we said, how are we going to do this? So we made some phone calls, and we got Rusty Young from Poco, played pedal steel on a couple songs. We got Al Perkins to play pedal steel on a couple songs. Buddy Cage from the New Riders of the Purple Sage. These are all friends of ours. So Buddy Cage played a couple songs. We got Mike Daly, who plays with Hank Jr. So we've got another record, Burrito Deluxe, with all of our different pedal steel players with their different approaches. And it's really, really neat. It's really, really good. Now we're trying to get that together and trying to get that out, trying to release that somehow. It needs to be mixed and mastered, but the Burrito Deluxe, and it's really, really fun. We work more in Europe than we do in the States, so I spend a bunch of time over there, which I really dig. Yeah.
What else are you working on at the moment?
At the moment, I'm trying to finish up a second Silly Grandpa record. And right now, I'm finishing up a very busy Santa Claus schedule. My professional Santa Claus this month, I've had 19 appearances between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And Saturday will be my 20th. And then after the first of the year, I think focus may direct back to that Ozark Mountain Daredevil album. The album's called Off the Beaten Path. I'm going to turn 67 years old in a couple days, and I'm the baby of the group. So my two partners, there are three of us left, John Dillon, Steve Cash, and myself. We've been together 46 years, and they have both turned 70. Now, we've had some health issues in the band over the last couple of years, which has kind of curtailed touring. So we don't really tour. We play a dozen festivals around the Midwest. Last year, the band we have together now, it's a really nice band. The three of us front it, and we've surrounded ourselves with some beautiful musicians. It's a really good band. So we said, why don't we go into the studio? Let's go record these new songs we've been writing. Kind of just chronicle this. If this is the last chapter of the Ozark Mountain Daredevils, let's get it down and just go and make a record. A CD.
No, a record.
Yeah, right. So we went in and we made a new record. And we really had a blast in the studio. With all the new technology, we used a lot of the new technology and made a really, really nice record. It's called Off the Beaten Path. Now, you can find it if you go to the Daredevils website and a couple other Facebook pages and stuff. It hasn't been released nationally, but we're kind of looking for a label. But it's finished and it's mastered, and it sounds really good. And people say, wow, that sounds like the Daredevils. Duh. It's the same guys, and so oftentimes playing the same instruments. The same guitar that was on the first record is on this record 45 years later. So yeah, it sounds like the Ozark Mountain Daredevils, and we're real happy with it. And I think a fan of the Daredevils is really going to enjoy it and appreciate the diversity of it, which was always one of our calling cards, diversity.
Yeah, and that's you guys' whole catalog. I just really dig you guys' stuff, and I've always been a fan of. You have the harmonies, you have the songwriting, you have this style. It's not really rock and roll, it's not really country. It's just like a mix of all these different styles. And I've always been a huge fan of bands that incorporate different styles, like the band or Little Feat or you guys.
Yeah, right.
And
well, see, there you go. The band had 3 lead singers. Little Feat had 2 or 3 lead singers. And I always liked bands like that. Like when you hear the Eagles, you immediately know it's the Eagles. If you hear any kind of solo artist, you just hear this. It's the same voice every song, and I like their voices. But with the Ozark Mountain Daredevils, we always had 5 lead singers. And instead of trying to make all of our songs sound homogeneous, we took each song individually and crafted it to pay respect to that song. That's why there's no banjos on Jackie Blue, and there's no saxophones on our bluegrass material. Our bluegrass material is bluegrass. It's full of mandolins and harmonicas and guitars and mandolins and banjos. And then the next track may be a pop ballad with a Fender Rhodes piano and some really lush harmonies. And so instead of trying to make all of our songs sound alike, we made them all try to sound different. Now, in the beginning, our record company didn't know where to put our records. They said, well, where do we put this stuff? Country bins? Do we put it in the rock and roll part of the record store? Do we put it in the pop section? We said, well, why don't you just put some in each section? Well, they didn't really understand that. So
what I like, though, is now we got this format called Americana.
Correct.
And you're like 40 years pre-Americana, so it took that long to establish a format that would actually be what you guys are in
Correct.
many ways.
Yeah. Yes.
And there was an early record you guys did, which I believe, if I got my facts right, was the early demos you did, but it came out as the Cabin Sessions.
The Lost Cabin Sessions.
Would you mind telling me a little bit about that record, because I really like that record.
Okay. In the beginning, we'd been together for a couple years, and we caught the ear of John Hammond in New York.
At Columbia?
Yes. And he heard this live tape we had. It was just a rough live tape, and he dug it. He sent a representative down to the Ozarks to hear us and record us, to make a demo tape, of which Columbia Records would get the first option. If they liked it, it was going to be on Columbia. Fantastic. Come on down. So they sent down a gentleman by the name of Mike Sunday. Mike Sunday came down to the Ozarks, and we went into the little 8-track studio where we used to work. And he paid for 3 days of recording time. And I think he wanted to get 3 or 4 songs. But we were so well rehearsed, and we were so together and so focused, he didn't get 3 or 4 songs. He got 24 songs. That first day, we just went bam, track, track, track after track after track after track after track. We worked all day and recorded 24 tracks. The next day, we went in and sang them because we were really good singers, which is another thing about our band, is we had really good singers. So we went and recorded sang all the tracks. The third day we mixed them all. And so instead of getting 3 or 4 songs, they got 24 songs. Okay, so we had 24 8-track, nicely mixed songs. We made our first record. Glenn Johns and David Anderley came in and cherry-picked 10 of them. All right. The second record came along, and I think they went and got 4 or 5 more of them. And by the third record, then we were writing new material, and we went on. So all of a sudden, we had 10 or 12 of these original tracks just kind of sitting there. The tracks that didn't make it onto the first 2 records were kind of left behind, so to speak. And I don't know who it was who down the line said, wait a minute, let's listen to these. And these were the songs that didn't make it onto the first 2 records. We're going, man, those things are neat. Those songs are really cool. And I don't even know the label, brother. But the label put them out as the Lost Cabin Sessions. Those were the songs that didn't make it onto the first couple records, and it's a really neat feeling record. That was the feel of the very first incarnation of the band. But not many people know about that record. I'm glad you brought that up, because that kind of, I think they made maybe 2,000 copies, maybe 3,000 copies. And to finish that thought, once those records were sold, they didn't make any more. So that's a rare record.
Well, I think the fact that you guys are, the singers and the harmonies, you got it all worked out, and the playing, it really, that's all it needs. You just got to go in and record it. While I guess some of those early records, you probably spent more time on it, which there's always a positive side of spending more time recording, but you might lose just a little bit of that spontaneity that is contained in those cabin sessions.
Right. Well, you see, with the Lost Cabin Sessions, see, we'd been playing those songs for two or 3 years, so those songs were as polished and honed as Country Girl and Chicken Train and Stand on the Rock, and those songs that went onto the first record. So we put just as much time and effort into those outtakes as we did the masters. So when you listen to those songs that didn't make the first record, it's not because they weren't good, because they're really good, but we just didn't use them. But yeah, that was the feel of us in an 8-track, 2-inch tape studios. Man, we had 8 tracks, man. Oh man, we could do anything we wanted. We were stacking stuff and bouncing stuff, but then we all knew about the studio, so we did worked real well in the studio, and it shows.
So if we go back way to the beginning, what are some of your earliest memories connected to music?
You mean before the Daredevils?
Yeah, as a kid.
As a kid, I had a crazy Uncle Don. I was a 10-year-old kid, and my father had a hi-fi, not a stereo. He had a high-fidelity record player, and he played his Frank Sinatra records and his Tony Bennett records, and they were fine, but I didn't really pay much attention to it. Like I said, I was listening more to How Much Is That Doggy in the Window, and Spike Jones. I was really into the Spike Jones stuff. My crazy Uncle Don came over with 2 records that kind of changed my life. Well, a few more, but the 2 that really got me was Fats Domino and Little Richard. I heard these records, I just went nuts for Fats Domino and Little Richard. And it was just rock and roll. I was going, oh man, what a wonderful change of pace it was from my father's Mel Torme records. All of a sudden, I was playing Little Richard, and he was going tutti frutti, and I was going, oh man, I love this. Then the Beatles hit. Beatles came right after that, and And then I noticed the Beatles songs, and they recorded, like some of these songs. I go, wait a minute. So that was kind of my transition into my musicianship when I was learning how to play the Beatles. I was going, wait a minute, this is the same thing as Little Richard, same chord progressions. And so that's when I started. And then being from St. Louis, there's Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry is my all-time songwriting idol, a beautiful American poet. So here I am. I'm 14 years old, and I'm, Chuck Berry and Little Richard and the Beatles and the Stones, and I'm just going, this is great. All right. And I learn how to do this real well, and I go off to college. And I meet the guys in the Daredevils. So we all get together. One of the guys had a very bluegrassy background. The other guy had more of a country background. One of the guys had more of like a pop ballad background. And then here I come in with Chuck Berry and the Rolling Stones. Let's do this. So that was my contribution to the Daredevils gumbo, was the up-tempo, let's have a party aspect. And but yeah, those my uncle brought over those Fats Domino records and Little Richard records, and they rearranged my DNA. And that's when I started to play the guitar, and that's when I started to be a musician, and I started putting together bands, and I just went nuts. So that was before the Beatles, before I got infected with the rock and roll bug. And here I am, 67 years old, and I still got the rock. Every time I put my guitar on, I feel like a giant 8th grader trying to learn how to play I Want to Hold Your Hand. Let's play it as good as we can. Let's play it as energetic as we can. And I still do that to this day.
Yeah. So in the beginning of the Daredevils, you kind of get together all these different songwriters and musicians.
Different styles.
So was it always kind of a conscious effort to kind of respect all the different styles, or were there at times where you're trying to be something in particular, or was it always kind of spirit of the band to kind of not define the sound, if you will?
It was always the spirit of the band to not define the sound. You put it very well. Because we were songwriters, and we played so many instruments. We'd get all of our instruments out. We'd have all our instruments laying around us. And somebody would present a song. Okay, here's how the song goes. Okay, what do we want on this? Do we want a dulcimer on this song? No. How about an electric piano? Yes. We did that on purpose because I didn't really want, we didn't really want our pop songs to have banjos on them. And we really didn't want our bluegrass songs to have saxophones on them. So there was a conscious effort to do that. And we all respected each other's ability to sing, write, and play. So when one person was presenting their song to the band, they held court. No, I don't like that. I don't like that direction you're taking that. There was never any hard feelings. Okay, well, I'll go another way. Now, when it came to my song, I could turn to my partners and say, oh, that's really good. You do that. And you do, oh, that's really good. You do that and you do that. But take a different approach. So there was always that mutual respect as artists among us that we really, really valued. And there were, no matter what went down, there was no hard feelings. There were no toes stepped on because it was all in the sake of making the song as good as it could be.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier on that obviously the record label had somewhat of an issue of how, they wanted to market you could market you.
Correct.
Did they ever try to put you in a box on the creative side too, or would they pretty much let you do your thing?
Good question. That's just what I was about to get to. We went in and made the first record. First record came out, we had a hit. Boom, if you want to get to heaven. All right. We went in to make the second record. And we had Jackie Blue. Boom, a hit. All right. Now, Jackie Blue was so atypical of what we did. But we're going, oh, well, this is such a cool song. We put it on the record because we had a lot of, our music was a little bit more country tinged. And then Jackie Blue came in. And they gave us complete creative, artistic control. And we handed in the record. And they heard song Walking Down the Road. Then they heard Black Sky. Then they heard, Probably Always Will. And then they heard Jackie Blue. And it was so different from all the other stuff on the album. They said, oh, well, we know what to do with this. They marketed it. Boom, number one. Fantastic. Then they said, oh, well, we need a follow-up single. What do you have? And we just went, nothing. Because we didn't have anything else that sounded like Jackie Blue. So they told us, well, go write something like Jackie Blue. And we went, well, we don't really approach our songwriting like that. They said, come on, give us Jackie Red. We want Jackie Green, Jackie Brown. Come on, give us something. Because they were in the business of selling records. And I can't blame them for wanting Jackie Red. Well, we didn't have Jackie Red. And we went in and made another record. Now they asked us. This is where the rub kind of comes in. It was Larry Lee's voice on Jackie Blue. And so they said on this new album, we want more of his voice on this album. Carl of the Lake album, which we made down here in Nashville, 1975. And so we made a concerted effort to have Larry's voice on the new record a little bit more. But that kind of took away from the diversity, kind of narrowed the scope a little bit. And our fans didn't really go for it. They wanted the wacky old stoned out hippies playing anything and everything and going all over the map. But they let us have artistic control, and they made a few suggestions. They wanted us to move to Los Angeles, which we declined. They wanted us to become more of a pop, to kind of go along follow the Jackie Blue trail. And we didn't do that. And after 6 albums, we parted ways. So we kind of stuck to our guns. May not have been very smart financially, but we stuck to our artistic guns, and we're still kind of proud of it.
Yeah. So all through the 70s and even beyond, you were very busy with the Daredevils.
Yes.
And then that became a little bit more of the focus after a certain time. So how was the transition of the Daredevils being your, main outlet to, kind of moving on while still doing the Daredevils, but kind of trying to explore some
other projects.
How did that happen for you?
Well, it kind of came back. It kind of came around organically. Another reason we were kind of butting heads with the record company was the fact that we didn't really want to tour that much. And they said, well, man, we got a hit record out there. Get out there, tour more. We've never done that. We would never go out for more than 3 weekends at a time. 3 weekends with the 2 weeks in between. So after 17 days, together, man, you're just kind of scratching each other's eyeballs out. You're at each other's throats. So we never would do that. We all had families back in the Ozarks. And we had houses we needed to maintain and keep up. So I think the most we've ever worked was maybe 80 or 90 days a year. So that leaves me 265 days off. And because I love what I do so much, I said, I don't want 265 off days. So I put together a little side band. And we would play around, but when the Daredevils played, I would be right on the team. I would go out and do the shows. But instead of coming home and doing nothing, I would go out and play with Supe and the Sandwiches. Or I would go out and play with the Garbanzos or some of my other bands. And then, because, when you're a songwriter, when you get, 2 songs every other year, that's not much of an outlet. And these songs started to pour out of me. That's why guys in bands put out solo albums. Oh, I'm going to do a solo album. And they go and they get 12 of their songs and they put it out on a solo album. The solo album, 9 times out of 10 isn't as successful as the band they're in. But it's an outlet for an artist and a songwriter. So I took my extra songs and put them into these other bands. So I started these other bands just to write some of my crazier stuff that was more like Little Richard and Spike Jones and the crazy stuff. And so, shoot, boy, I think I have 4 or 5 side projects that I funnel all of my crazy material into. But when it comes time for the Daredevils, I go into my catalog and I pull out half a dozen songs that I think fit the sound and the brand. But Mo, I've got all kinds of side projects.
Yeah, we could just so we mentioned Burrito Deluxe, Supe and the Sandwich, Supe the Shooter, but there's also like Dog People.
The Dog People.
Supe and the Sandwiches, the Garbanzos. You mentioned those, the Sheet Rockers.
The Sheet Rockers.
The Mark and Mike Show.
Mark and Mike, that's my comedy duo that I wrote with my partner Mark Horn. We wrote a bunch of they're real bluegrass. Banjo and mandolin. And we did it on purpose to sound like and pay homage to Homer and Jethro. Homer and Jethro was another one of my main influences when I was young. I heard, those Homer and Jethro records and just went, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing in the world. So Mark and Mike, you can find it somewhere. Ooh, that's another one that's kind of really out of print. But Mark and Mike, Homer and Jethro. And there, I just wrote a bunch, I wrote 8 or 9 bluegrass tunes and put them on this Mark and Mike record and put it out. Then I started to write rock and roll songs and I put it out as the Sheet Rockers. We had that dry wall of sound.
I like that.
and then each time I get a body of songs, or I call them litters, I write songs in litters. Right now, I think I have 4 or 5 in various stages of completion. And when I get 8, 10, I go into the studio and record them all. And then that's the album that comes out at that time. Whether it's a Soup du Jour record, whether it's a Supe and the Sandwiches record, whether it's a Garbanzo record, whatever it is, that's what I'm doing at that period of my life.
And you started Missouri Mule Music to release some of that, or most of that music?
All of it. When Daredevils first started, the 8-track studio I was telling you about was run by 2 gentlemen, Wayne Carson and Cy Simon. Wayne Carson wrote the letter.
And Soul Deep and Always on My Mind.
Always on My Mind. And Cy Simon was his publisher. So they kept all the publishing. Can you imagine the publishing checks from the letter? Yikes. Can you say 00000? Lots of zeros on that check. But anyway, they took that publishing money they were making from the letter and Soul Deep, and they built a studio. So they rented out to us, and we went in and we worked in Wayne Carson's studio. And these 2 men preached at us, Wayne Carson and Cy Simon, don't give up your publishing. Don't give up your publishing. Don't give up your publishing. When we got our record contract with A&M, we walked in and said, we only want one thing. We're not going to give up our publishing. They thought they were hiring a hick band from Missouri, and they were going to, take our publishing. And we walked in and said, we're not going to do that. We're going to keep our publishing. So we kept our publishing, Lost Cabin Music, for, 30 years. So the Jackie Blue money was coming right to us. if you want to get to heaven, money was coming right to us. So I understood the importance of setting up your own publishing company and keeping your publishing. When I moved to Nashville in 1991, I set up Missouri Mule Music to keep my publishing. For all the songs that I get recorded by Chet Atkins and Billy Bremner and Augie Meyer, Walter Egan, they've all recorded my songs. I get the publishing check. Every quarter, I get my check. It's in my mailbox. So that's how I started Missouri Mule Music, because I understood the importance of keeping your publishing, because the Daredevils had kept theirs for decades, and it's afforded me a wonderful life. That's Missouri Mule Music.
And part of that wonderful life is your beautiful home. You have this great deck and beautiful backyard and great little studio where you can be creative. How important is that, let's call it maybe sanctuary, or that creative space for you?
No, sanctuary is a perfect word for it. As an old hippie from the 60s, I love that. I love surrounding myself with a creative environment. Another one of my passions outside of music, and we'll do this on a whole other thing, is gardening. I love to garden, and I love to plant things. I love to plant bamboo and make sculptures and plant tomatoes and peppers so I bought my house, and it's got these beautiful gardens and the deck, and I just sit out there, and it's comfortable. I have to feel comfortable when I write. I can't. That's why I have a hard time with coming down to Nashville. So, okay, well, we're going to write from 2 to 4 because I have to leave because I have to write with another guy from 5 to 7. Okay, I have a hard time doing that because if at 2 o'clock I don't feel like it, it's kind of hard for me to get into it. Hey, look, I've been writing since 10:30 this morning. I have my little sanctuary. I have my studio. I have my deck. I have my gardens. I have my kitchen. I like to cook, too. I'm a good cook. And when I'm around there, sometimes songs will hit me when my hands are in the dirt. My hands are in the dirt and I'm planting tomatoes. A song will hit me and I'll go, uh-oh, here it comes. So I'll wash my hands, wash the mud off my hands from my garden, run inside, grab my guitar, go into my studio, and the song just kind of falls out of me. I write it down. The muse tells me when to write. I don't tell it when to write. Now, I can go and I can be funny and creative from 2 to 4. But when a song hits me, I have to pay respect to the muse, and I have to pay respect to that song and give it the time and attention it needs to kind of just flow through me. And so that's what I've done in my home. I've been in my home for decades. Same house, out by Percy Priest Lake. And sometimes I go for days without ever leaving. When I get into a work mode and I get into a groove, I'll stay there for 3 or 4 days and never leave and get lots of work done. And I love it.
Well, a few years ago, you got into such a creative groove, but it would not manifest itself in songs, but in a book. You wrote and published a book called Eat Shine, the Saga of the Ozark Mountain Daredevils,
Yep.
which you wrote without a ghostwriter or anything. That's all you.
Correct.
How did that book, what's the genesis of that book?
Well, I think it's been out about 10 years now. So I guess about 11 years ago, I was sitting there kind of going, I've always liked books. I mean, the one I liked the best was Levon Helm's book, The Wheels on Fire. This Wheels on Fire. I read it and just went, oh man, because the band is my all-time favorite musical entity in the universe. And I read it and I went, oh man, that's so good. And I went back and read it again. And I'm interested in, hearing about, how bands come about and the story of an artist or a performer or a band. And I was like, man, somebody needs to write the story of the Daredevils because it's so unique and it's so American and it's so crazy. And I went, well, if I don't do it, I knew none of my partners would. I said, if I don't do it, it won't get done. So I walked in to my office. I sat down at my computer. I said, okay, how do you do this? Well, I guess the first thing you do is you start pressing these buttons, these letters, and I started typing. I went, okay, and I started typing. I went clickety-clack, clickety-clack, clickety-clack. And it's the same process as writing a song. You write as long as the muse is flowing through you. And so instead of a guitar in my lap, I had a computer keyboard in front of me. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack, clickety-clack. And I sat there and I wrote for hours. It was just flying through my fingers. And I went, oh man, this is great. Wow, fantastic. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack. Oh, I'm tired. So I went to bed. Woke up the next morning and read what I wrote. And went, wow, that's pretty good. Okay. Chapter 2. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack, clickety-clack. And then we click. And all of a sudden, I was going, wait a minute. All of a sudden, I've got 2 chapters. I'm going, wait. Okay, fantastic. And I just kept at it. I kept at it, and I kept at it. And sometimes I would sit in the chair. I would sit there it was nothing to sit there for 12 straight hours. Start at 4 in the afternoon and write till 4 in the morning. And then all of a sudden I says, and then I wrote about the first album. Blah, 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 blah. Then I wrote about the second album. Blah, 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 blah. Then I wrote the third album. Then I wrote about the touring. And then I wrote about losing our record contract. Then I wrote about, some of the bad stuff that happened. The alcohol and the cocaine. And then I wrote about the resurgence and how this, and all of a sudden I'd written about 400 pages. And I went, well, okay. Because if I don't do it, nobody's going to do it. And I really kind of wanted it on the history shelf as much as the music shelf, because it's part of American history. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Yeah. But I figured, like I said, if I don't do it, it won't get done. And I had that, and I have a discipline for myself that when a song is coming up, I'll give it enough time. When it comes time to make a record, I can sit in the studio. I can sit in there for 16 hours, overdubbing and singing and mixing and tweaking and arranging. When it comes to that, I have complete discipline. Now, when it comes to some of the other areas of my life, I don't have any discipline. But when it comes to creating, I have great discipline. And when I wrote that book, I found out that it's the same process. Whether you're writing a novel or a newspaper article or a 3-minute pop song, it's the same process. It's just with this book, it took me 5 years instead of, an afternoon.
Is that what it took you from like the first page till it being published?
Yes. The first 6 months was research. I gathered all of my partners. I went and talked to each one individually. And I said, tell me what you remember about this gig. And I would ask and then tell me what you remember about this record and about this and this and this. And I went to each one individually. Sometimes, and then out of all their stories, along with my vision of it, or my remembrance of it, and then I could kind of cull together the story. I would go to one guy and I said, tell me what you remember about this gig? Oh man, it was raining like cats and dogs. I went to the next guy and I said, tell me what you think about this gig. Oh, remember, it was a beautiful day. I went, hi. So when I went to 5 different opinions, if 4 of them said it was a beautiful day, and one guy says it was raining cats and dogs. It was probably a beautiful day. So it took me 6 months of researching, and then I got this real long roll of paper, and I put it around my office, and on it it was a timeline: 1971, 1972, 1973, 74, 75, 76, 77, 80, 81, 82, 83, 94, 95, 96, 97, 2001, 2002, and I actually taped it up in my office. And I started writing 1971, 1972, and then I went along like this. And then when I remembered something, I would go, that's back here in 1977. So I would go back and I'd find my place, and I would massage that story into what I had already written. And then all of a sudden, when I got to 500 pages, I had to quit, because that's all the amount of pages that the actual bookbinder could handle. But it took me 6 months of research, about 4.5 years of writing. Now, when I got to about a year out from finishing the manuscript, I said, man, I'm getting close. What am I going to do with this? So I sent it out to went to the library. I got Levon's book, and I looked at the publisher, and I got Eric Clapton's book, and I got Keith's book, and I got, Ringo's book, or whoever wrote a book, and I would write to these publishers. And I think I wrote to 13 publishers, and I got one rejection. No, I got one. We like it, but we can't put it out for about 6 or 7 more years because we have so many books in the queue. Okay, well, 6 or 7 years, I might be dead. Our fans might be dead. We're a bunch of old guys. And I got 12, just complete, no response. Crickets. And now all of a sudden I'm going, well, wait a minute. Nobody wants to publish this. I went, what am I going to do? Thankfully, there's this thing called self-publishing and print on demand. So I went to a banker friend of mine. I said, Jimmy, I'm going to self-publish this book, and I need some cash. He says, how much do you need? And I said, I think I need $33,000. He said, no problem. He said, Nancy, secretary, go cut a check for $33,000. And I walked out with a check. And I went right to Author House, which is a self-publishing company. I said, now, let me see, I think I got 2,500 copies. And then I just started selling them. And I would sell 2 here, I would sell 10 here. Somebody wanted a box of 20, I would go here, and then I just started selling them self-published. I just did it all myself because I couldn't find anybody to help me with it. And being a stubborn Missouri mule, I'm going to do this, damn it. And I did it.
And going back to the perks of owning your own publishing.
Correct.
Your whole thing.
Correct. Now I've gotten into a couple other little companies that on print on demand. You can go to a couple websites and order the book, and they'll sell it, and then they send me, I think, $8 a book, or not even that much. But when I was selling them, it cost $15, $12 to print up, and then when I sold them, I kept all the money. Once again, like you said, the advantages of being your own publishing company. And that came out on Missouri Mule Music. And I keep the publisher half of the check and the writer's half of the check.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you must be very proud of that book because you put so much of your life and energy and time in it, and it comes out. Is there anything, like, if we circle back to the music, any record of all through your career that that means more to you than some of the others, or that's like, oh, this is my best work maybe, or is it the latest one?
No. Well, yeah, there's the latest. You're always most energetic and enthusiastic about your latest album, but I think for the Daredevils, it was a record called "It'll Shine When It Shines," which is where I derived the title of my book, with the same woman on the cover. It shined. Yes, it did shine. It shined very brightly. We were into a creative space of about two weeks. Everybody was in sync. Everybody was throwing out songs. We were recording songs. That's where Jackie Blue came from, that session. It was so creative. We were just, it was literally milk and honey. It was just wonderful. That's the album I'm most proud of with the Daredevils, because it was such a prolific time. Man, we were just a bunch of 25-year-old kids. We're 25-year-old kids with guitars and beer. We didn't know what we were doing in the early 70s. We were just making stuff up. Let's try this. Yay! Let's try this. Yay! And there were no rules. We weren't bound by any kind of company. We had complete artistic control. We had complete creative control. And we were just making stuff up as we were going along and throwing it against the wall. Fortunately, it stuck. So I was real proud of those first couple records. And then all of a sudden we were flying around the world, and all of a sudden there were other things that were kind of pulling us in different directions. And then people started falling off by the wayside. We started losing members and bringing in members, and then it started to go like it started to wobble a little bit. But those first two records are just crystal clear and complete artistic vision. Yeah, man.
Yeah. So, what are you looking forward to? What do you have coming up that you would like to talk about?
Right now, remember how I told you how hard it was to write that book?
Yeah.
Well, I've written two more.
It must have been not that bad.
No, I guess it wasn't that bad. In the 90s, I was a baseball writer for my St. Louis Cardinals. I'm a baseball nut. And I wrote a monthly column for this magazines up there. And back in the 90s, 80s and 90s. Well, I've collected them into a collection. So I think I have 64 essays and articles about baseball. And it's completed. Now I don't have the money to go and self-produce it or self-publish it. And then the new project I'm finishing up this year, hold on, knock on wood, is I've been writing a Santa Claus book. What it's like to actually be a professional Santa Claus, and the funny things that happen to me with the children. And I'm finishing that book up too. And so here after the holiday season, I'll have 2 books completed. So I'm looking for a publisher. So if there's any publishers out there in your audience, contact me and I'll lay them on you. But along with that, and then along with music, just music, the tap was turned on in the 50 years ago, and I can't seem to turn it off. I can't seem to turn it off.
Well, that's a beautiful thing.
That's a beautiful thing. Nor do I want to. So it's just kind of flowing at such a wonderful, wonderful pace. So I've got a bunch of new songs that I want to record, a couple new records that I want to make, a couple new books that I want to get out, and then just kind of go along and then see what comes onto my plate. Let's see what comes onto my plate tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because it'll be interesting.
Well, thank you so much for being my guest today.
You're quite welcome, brother.
I certainly enjoyed listening to you tell all your stories. You're such an interesting, creative guy. I could keep talking and talking.
I've had a wonderful music and art and writing has afforded me a wonderfully comfortable bohemian life. I realize I'm one of the lucky ones, and I'm very thankful. Thank you.
Thank you, and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
This was the 14th episode of the Crazy Chester Radio Hour. We taped it at Buzz Cason's Creative Workshop recording studio in Nashville. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. Until next week, have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.